What does it take to transform teams and empower women in the workplace? I'm Annie Gibbins. Women's Biz Leaders starts now. Women's Biz Leaders, presented by Women's Biz Global, where each episode we dive into the journeys and successes of remarkable women in business. In this episode, we unveil the key to elevating team performance, and joining me is the esteemed coach, Pollyanna Lenkic. Welcome, Pollyanna.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you on the show today, and I love talking performance. And performance does come with leadership, but it's all about elevating the team so the whole team will perform better. I'd love you to share with our viewers today, what excites you about this area? How have you become an expert in it, and what changes do you see possible in teams?
Oh, so much to talk about here, right? I think what I love about this work is the real difference it makes. And I love that moment when a team realizes within the team, they've got everything they need to excel, right? So they don't need me anymore when I walk away from the process. And it is a process. You know that time when you went, I want to be bendy like my friend who does yoga every day, and you buy Lululemon? Are you bendy? No, right? It takes work. So elevating performance is continually building on your expertise. No one's really an expert of anything, really. We're just constantly striving and building and moving forward. So there's a couple of key principles. One, the team has within it the means to excel. The team is a living, breathing system. It's an entity in its own right. And this is a really important factor. Moving from individual needs to what does the team need? Just that question makes a difference. And the reason you're together is to get results, so getting clarity on what that is. Beautiful.
So when you go into a company and you're actually probably discovering there's a whole lot of few little stars, few little worker bees, but obviously people working in silos. So it's actually saying collectively, have you really looked at who is in your team and how you can join together? That's going to have some issues with trust, confidence. What are the challenges when you first go into a company?
Absolutely. So the first thing we do is we measure. We take a baseline diagnostic. I use the Team Coaching International diagnostic. You can't manage what you can't measure, as Drucker says, right? Yes. So we measure, and we measure across 14 key capabilities. 7 are positivity factors: engagement, how does this team engage together? Trust, how we build relationship, how we build the desire to show up and be our best here. And 7 are around productivity factors. The magic happens in the intersection of the two. So how do we show up together while we do the work of the team?
Do you notice when you're in those companies that there are specific barriers to women in those teams, and what are they?
Look, there are barriers to women in the workforce and in our world and society, right? So I don't know that we have long enough to dive into all of those barriers, but there's something that's really important to do a fundamental shift on, and that is stop fixing women. We do not need fixing, the system needs fixing. So understanding what are the systemic barriers that are holding success back for female leaders and all women in your organisation, in your system. Work on that while we still provide support for women who are for all women as we navigate those challenges. I hope that in my lifetime I hold optimism that in my lifetime I will see that shift happen, because once we remove those systemic barriers, then we actually have the environment. Can you imagine what you can do, what a team of women can do in an organisation as part of a team when we're not having to focus on navigating the barriers that are holding us back? They're systemic issues, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So all of these concerns to you have been like myself, but you actually went and wrote a book about it, Women and Success, and I've read your book. It's absolutely fantastic. Was this because you wanted to be part of the change? For us to shift the dial, you actually have to not only be proactively working on teams and peak performance and other things, but uncovering issues that's right. I know you're known to say, what would happen if you had 25% upward shift just by challenging the status quo in these sorts of discussions. What led you to write the book, and what have you noticed since doing that and still pushing forward in this area?
Yeah, really good question. I embarked on my first startup when I was 24. Broke Aussie backpacker in London, no idea didn't have a return ticket home, didn't have residency. People laughed me out of the building, right? And I learned so much, and I took that from a small company in partnership to an £11 million turnover business with 110 consultants throughout the UK and also 18 full-time team members. And I made a lot of mistakes, right? And I learned. I was,
of course,
during that process. But when I opted to move away from that company, and it was a values-based decision, I got really curious because people were telling me how successful I was, and my self-esteem was down the toilet. I did not feel successful at all. So I got deeply curious about what does success mean to women and why does this matter? That's what led me on that journey. It started with a question.
What does success mean and how do you measure it?
And why does it matter? Why does it matter in our world? Because the measures of success have been traditionally based on parameters around measures of traditional, on a male paradigm of success.
Exactly.
Not right or wrong, just different.
Yes.
Right?
So different. And when you actually look at your story, it's phenomenal. So I imagine at that time for a backpacker to actually create a business so huge and be financially secure, to have that many staff, anyone objectively with that traditional paradigm would say, you've done it all. Just keep doing what you're doing. And so for you to actually get to a point, you go, but I'm measuring success in a different way. And the way you said it was values-based, well, then you've got to know what your values are.
Correct.
You've got to know how you're measuring success. Do you think many of us don't actually take that opportunity to take stock of that?
I think it's really important that we do take stock, and it's really, I believe, personally, it's important to take regular stock, because what you want today might be different to what you wanted 10 years ago. 15 years ago, I just wanted to sleep through the night, right? My kids were younger.
Yes.
So what we want is different. So it is important to take stock. I think the number one gift you can give anyone you lead is to show up as your adult self. And that takes work. So that links back to taking stock of who we are, not just what our values are, but how we live those values. If I'm watching a documentary of Annie living her values, what am I seeing?
Yes.
Right? It's really, it's a big conversation.
Yes. And then you're linking that with your company values. So while you
Correct.
went and referred to your own business and then suddenly the value that you measured it was different, many of those teams that you're going into, some of the blocks might be because some of those individuals who would be stellar performers in a different environment may not align with the values of the organisation that they're actually in.
Correct. And there's two decisions really that I think of immediately. One is bring your values into the system.
Yes.
How do you do that? Or reassess and respectfully and move on to an environment that is better suited. It's an important self-reflection.
I think it's so important, and it's so wonderful to see so many corporates these days actually putting their values up front and centre. This is who we are, this is what we value, and then you have to actually live and breathe that. So it's not a surprise to many of the employees what their values are, whereas in the past it's been something that was sort of hidden or on the website, and if you ask many people they wouldn't know what the values are. Do you find that it's quite palpable in many workplaces, or is that an area we still have to work on?
I think there's work to be done there. I think yes, it's a yes and. The behaviours are missing sometimes. What are the behaviours that bring these values to life? So yes, absolutely distill the values and include this is what these values look like in our behaviours, in how we show up every day. I was working with an amazing team, senior leaders, and they were talking about their values of respect. And at the end of the meeting, everyone stood up and walked out of the meeting room. And I'm like, hang on a minute, see all these muffins and dirty coffee cups? How's respect playing out right now in this team? It's really bringing it down to the smaller details. I think and that was absolutely eye-opening for that team, and they completely reevaluated their behaviours and how they showed up in their leadership.
Yes, because it's the combination of the small little moments that actually do form what that value resembles itself as to the people around them. So often you do the big flagship sort of statements and opportunities, but it's got to be consistent. It's about consistency, isn't it? So for those of you people that you've worked in a lot of different organisations, big organisations. What are you noticing about how people are measuring their success as leaders, and what's changing in that space, if anything?
I think people are becoming more connected to who they're being as a leader while they're doing the work of leadership. which I think is really heartening to see. And organisations that invest not just in invest in themselves, invest in that self-leadership piece. How do I show up? What am I doing as a leader? And then once we do that, we're able to lead others. You have to know yourself before you can lead others, right?
Yes.
With the team space, it's an absolute shift from individual focus to systems thinking, team focus. What does the team need, and how do we show up together across 14 key categories, which are measured based on global research that show if we invest our time in this together as a team, we will raise performance.
One thing I absolutely love is when women particularly call themselves emerging leaders. I'm an emerging leader, and I think what a wonderful statement that's coming about, that they actually identify themselves, not like myself who, ran companies, soccer clubs, did all these things, did multiple degrees, and suddenly had a moment in life and went, I'm a leader. They're actually realizing earlier and earlier. Do you think it's important that more and more people see those leadership qualities, and some of them will be natural and many of them are learnt and refined, but they're going to make them such better leaders and team members moving forward?
I think there's something very important about what you're pointing to, and that is we all start out pretty mediocre in new tasks, right?
Yes.
And so it's how we scaffold and build those tasks. So as a human being, as an individual, how do I continue to push through and be resilient and sit with the discomfort of not feeling adequate in this task?
Yes.
As a leader, it's how do we nurture and mentor people through that phase so that they can see the potential ahead. It's the growth mindset piece. It's the Carol Dweck piece around yet. I'm not excellent at this yet. And I think that, I think about my skydiving days, the first jump, I knew enough to land without dying, right? That was pretty useful. By the 525th jump, I had a whole bunch of other skills built up over years. Is leadership not that much different, really? We're constantly growing, evolving. We're constantly adding to our skill set. I don't know. I hold the term expert really loosely because are we experts? No, we're managing and working through our lives and building on our expertise.
Absolutely. We could talk all day on this topic. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Pollyanna. It's been a great discussion, and thank you for joining us. What a wonderful moment to take stock. And that's right, I'm a skier. You don't just ski down that hill for the first time looking fantastic. You're generally going to crash and burn a few times, but it's all about knowing what you're actually wanting, who you're wanting to be, and start practicing those qualities, those habits. Be aligned, surrounded by people who are going to support that. I look forward to hearing your journeys, our beautiful viewers on Women's Biz Leaders. Until next time, take care.
Thank you.
You're watching Ticker. We'll have more in just a few minutes.